Hello everyone, this is Kat and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfic. This will be the continuation and last and final chapter for Yuuei Survival Guide, Chapter 50. 3 days. It's been 3 days since Izuku tried to return Oboro's spirit to his body. It's been 3 days since their child's heart stopped, since the insistent, ringing beep of the heart monitor announced that Izuku's heart had stopped in his chest. It's been 3 days since Shota watched the child keel over before his eyes. Shota rooted in place as he and Hisashi clutched desperately at each other in fear, only able to watch from their spot despite their own first aid knowledge and hero licenses. A feeling of helplessness settling like a brick in his chest. 3 days since Shota had watched as the medical personnel that he'd never been more thankful for had flocked to Izuku and Oboro urgently. 3 of the medics falling to their knees around Izuku, hands all over him, while Tsukuchi and the 4th medic rushed to Oboro's body. Shota lifts his head from his hands now, scanning Izuku's tiny prone form in the hospital bed. It had been 3 days since that small team of medics got his heart beating again. His gaze lifts a bit higher, eyes struggling to focus on the second prone form in the next bed over. It's been 3 days since Shirakumo Oboro's heart started steadily beating again. It's a literal miracle, after nearly 14 years as Shigaraki's impossible little puppet. It's been 3 days, and there haven't been any improvements. Izuku's temperature had dropped far faster than anyone was prepared for, and according to the doctor who'd rushed the child away upon arrival at the hospital, Izuku had manifested so much energy through, they're not even sure, Shota's guess being one for all that he carefully hadn't mentioned, that his heart had essentially been so overwhelmed by the energy consuming the teenager's body that it just stopped. Izuku's heart had needed to be jump-started, so it would start beating again. Chest compressions done by the medics were the only thing that had brought Izuku back. The doctor had said it was the worst case of quirk overuse and exhaustion he'd ever seen. Shota can't help but think about how that information tracks for Izuku. He throws himself into everything he does, Shota knows. Izuku had quite literally tried to give Oboro everything he had. His heart breaks, but it does make sense. The medics had quite literally saved the child's life by their fast response times. If they hadn't been there, Izuku might not be here anymore. And here, being quite a loose term considering the boy's only alive right now because he's supported by machines, there's a steady beeping of his heart monitor, almost like music to Shota's ears, but this is hardly being alive. He's comatose, and hasn't shown any signs of waking. Similarly, Oboro looks so small too, despite the fact he'd been obnoxiously tall as a teenager. He hasn't grown at all over the years, which makes sense considering his body was dead and preserved. Whatever All for One had done to his corpse had preserved Oboro's youth. All Shota is really thankful for is the fact that Oboro's internal workings were all still there and able to be restarted. He still had a heart, brain, lungs, organs, and internal workings. Shota doesn't know what All for One truly did to his friend all those years ago when he had gotten his hands on Oboro's body, but it's a breath of relief to know everything that should be there still is there. He'd been rushed away upon arrival for scans, x-rays, and every other test under the sun. Oboro's body hadn't been healed all those years ago. They'd been using him all this time, but they hadn't healed anything. Some of his bones were still shattered from the building that had taken his life. He was a medical marvel, as far as doctors and nurses could see. Anyone, even stepping foot into Izuku and Oboro's hospital room, were all under strict non-disclosure agreements, but that didn't mean they were privy to what actually happened. That was entirely confidential, to protect not just Oboro, but Izuku as well. Oboro had 12 healing sessions, mainly a bone repair specialist who comes by every 4 hours to try to mend the breaks and align the fractures. His quirk takes the structure of metals, medical-grade titanium mostly, and transfers it into bone density. It's essentially just adding titanium plating to bones by infusing the metal into the bone structures directly. It reinforced bone strength as well as mending what's been broken. And Oboro had needed 12 sessions thus far. The man is continuously shocked by the fact that someone could have lived with such atrocious breaks. 4 vertebrae in his spine had been completely shattered, and 3 more cracked. More of his ribs than not were cracked. His skull was fractured, arms snapped in middle places. He had a broken ankle, and both tibias and his shins were cracked, obvious impact fractures. Seeing those x-rays, you'd be able to tell that his body had been crushed under something heavy. When Shota shuts his eyes, he can imagine Oboro trying to protect his face or even getting caught off guard by the building completely, too busy worrying about others than himself. Shota had seen the aftermath of Oboro after that villain attack. hadn't been able to tear his eyes away from Oboro's unmoving body, still sometimes sees the scene in his nightmares. All these years, they were the kinds of injuries Shota always knew his friend would have after being crushed by a building, but he'd never been prepared to really see how extensive it was. It's a surprise Kurogiri was even able to stand with such extensive damage to his vessel, but then again, what would a Nomu care if it couldn't feel pain? The Nomu they'd been studying had no functions, no brain activity, no heart rate, no reaction to pain or stimuli. Kurogiri was relatively advanced, but he was still a Nomu. Shota hadn't known how to tell the man that someone hadn't lived with it, but something had. Shota bites his tongue and forces his attention away. The man is glad Oboro hadn't woken up yet either. He'd be in a world of pain if he had. It was still up in the air if Oboro would ever walk again, let alone if he'd ever wake up. It was likely he'd have some chronic pain just from the severity of the injuries, especially left untreated for so long. Nothing's guaranteed. They still haven't brought in their secret weapon of recovery girl, considering Oboro's stamina is near non-existent, but there's always a chance for a miracle when healing quirks are involved. Tsukuchi had managed to get Izuku and Oboro both into a secluded room in the intensive care unit. Shota doesn't know what the man had pulled, but it was obviously something. Oboro was cuffed to the bed, with quirk-canceling cuffs anytime he wasn't receiving some sort of healing session. He was still technically in custody. Tsukuchi couldn't bypass that protocol. Shota knows his reasoning is legit. They couldn't be sure if this had worked until Oboro or Kurogiri woke up. It was better safe than sorry, even if seeing Oboro's teenage face, cuffed to the bed like he's a threat or something, was a sight Shota's sure he'll never forget. It's up there, almost as high as finding Oboro after he'd died. Shota's gaze flicks to Hisashi, who's curled up in a small cot they'd requested in the room. Neither of them had left the hospital since they'd each taken an ambulance with either Izuku or Oboro. Hisashi had only just fallen asleep, after nearly 26 hours awake. Shota still couldn't force himself to sleep, but out of the two of them, he's definitely the one used to functioning with little sleep. It's for the best anyways. Shota had assured his husband he'd stay awake and wake him up if anything had happened, but as expected, nothing has happened yet. Hisashi looks exhausted. Even asleep, he looks exhausted. Shota wishes he could take the pain away from his husband. There are very few people who know about what happened. He, Hisashi, and Tsukuchi, of course. Nezu knows, but Shota isn't quite sure how. Recovery Girl was clued in, just so she was prepared to come if they needed her. The old woman had readily assured she'd be waiting for a call. Shota had told Yuuei the bare minimum, nothing about Izuku's quirk, just that there'd been an accident, that Izuku got caught up in, and that it wasn't looking good. Shota had then had to answer an angry call from Hitoshi, where the teenager had yelled his emotions out before ending up dissolving in sobs, when Shota had gently confided that he wasn't sure if Izuku would really be okay. "He was fine when I saw him 2 days ago, Uncle Sho," Hitoshi had wailed out angrily, at which point Yuuei had taken the phone from her son and apologized softly on Hitoshi's behalf. Shota can't blame the kid. He knows Hitoshi is just as close to Izuku. Shota kinda wants to cry like that as well. Oboro's existence was being kept quiet. There was no point saying anything unless they knew it wasn't going to hurt everyone all over again. It's cruel to do that to someone. They'd already mourned him once. The Shirakumo family didn't need hope after so long accepting Oboro was gone, only for this to backfire and leave them grieving all over again. Shota and Hisashi had vehemently denied contacting his family until they knew for sure he'd live, that whatever Izuku had risked his own life to accomplish actually worked, despite the fact that he was technically a minor, visibly at least. That was Tsukuchi's fight, though. All Shota and Hisashi wanted to focus on was their son and their possibly resurrected best friend. Shota sighs quietly again, letting his hand settle over Izuku's once more. His temperature had risen steadily, nearly back to average now. His hand is blissfully warm under Shota's own, but he's still unconscious. He's still not okay. They'd let him hurt himself. They'd let him be too kind, and now they might never get him back. What Izuku feels when his brain finally clears from the overwhelming fog that has come over him as soon as his hand had settled along Kurogiri's jaw is a familiar yet entirely foreign feeling of weightlessness. For a long second, he can't place where he is. He blinks hazy eyes open, scans his surroundings. All at once it clicks into place. "How long has it been?" Izuku croaks out hoarsely, gaze drifting slowly. The breathy response comes just a second later, and Izuku's unsurprised to find he's not alone. The disembodied voice he hadn't bothered searching for the figure of replies sympathetically, sounding as unsurprised to be acknowledged without Izuku even looking in his direction as Izuku had sounded acknowledging the figure. Not long. There's a long second before the voice, first, obviously, considering Izuku was in One for All again, and none of the other vestiges were ever around unless he needed them directly, continues softly. Time works a bit differently here. You're still... The vestige hesitates. At this moment in the real world, you're still touching the Nomu, although your friend has been... Well, I'll admit, Ninth, that I never thought something like this would be possible. Something like what? Izuku cuts himself off, glancing quickly to the vestige before letting his gaze follow first downward. And there, laid out on his side, was Oboro. What the hell did I do? Izuku breathes out hurriedly, rushing toward the ghost, despite the inky green of One for All's realm clinging to his lower half. Will he be... He'll be fine, First assures gently. I'm not entirely sure how you pulled this off, but he's okay. You were right about his connection to One for All when you were talking to those two heroes. I saw one Yamada, right? The quirk does consider him an extension of you, so he was able to... When I pulled you away, you brought him with you. You pulled me away? Izuku asked slowly. Why? I've never seen One for All produce energy like this. First shakes his head slowly. I didn't quite know what it would do to you. I've seen One for All since the start of its existence, but I'm not sure I've ever seen it reach this level of power. Izuku remains quiet, letting that thought sink in. First would have seen a lot of power from the quirk if he'd been watching from the start, not only from the Seven Wielders prior to All Might, but Izuku knows how strong Yagi-san had been with it, so to know that First hadn't seen this kind of power that had coursed through Izuku's body, that he'd physically drawn Izuku into One for All for safety, it's a lot to think about. The vestige looks away for a second before his gaze is back on Izuku, expression almost disapproving. This wasn't a very smart move, Ninth. I'm not sure what will happen. Your temperature has dropped significantly, and your heart... My... heart? Am I dying? Izuku breathes out, setting a hand on Oboro's side. The ghost barely stirs, but he does move faintly, enough so that Izuku knows he's not dead. Or not ghost dead. Still, it's relieving. The silence is loud to Izuku's ears when he realizes First hadn't answered him. Izuku whips around to face the vestige. Am I? I don't know. The vestige confesses, almost sounding worried. Quirks have changed the biology of humankind. I lived during a period where quirks were new, biology changing to contain quirks to their fullest extent. Humans advancing. Ninth, your body is one of a quirkless person. But I have a quirk, Izuku swallows roughly. I've always had a quirk. I can see ghosts. I can touch ghosts. I made Oboro visible. I made him solid. That has to be... Your body is quirkless. First repeats softly. Your body was never meant to house a quirk. You couldn't have had a quirk, Ninth. That's simply how our world works. How quirks work. Prior to One for All, you didn't have a quirk factor. You can see ghosts, but that's all it is. But my quirk... I know. First sighs again. I've been thinking about it. After the Hosu incident, when we met for the first time, I told you that you needed to control your quirk before you'd be able to master One for All. Your ability to see us so openly opened a door to new dangers that no one was prepared for. Our presence is chilling. Your friend's presence is chilling. That was all true, but he was never using you. I'm afraid I was wrong in my assessment. I just couldn't see it then. I don't think that you've... Look, Ninth. I believe it was your friend who initiated all of this. Oboro? Izuku looks down at his still unconscious friend, the hand resting on the solid form of the ghost tightening faintly. What do you mean? He doesn't have any quirk besides Cloud. How could he... All for One changes DNA structures, First explains simply. Accepting One for All mutated your DNA, but it never changed your biology. The pale vestige cards his fingers through his hair as he pauses for a second. To take or receive a quirk, he's essentially taking a piece of you or giving you a piece of himself that he'd taken from elsewhere. Anything that touches his quirk belongs to him, even if for a short period of time his DNA overpowers. Quirks are ingrained in our DNA, in our biology. When my brother gave me One for All those years ago, I believe it left a bit of himself. And when he used your friend's body to create a Nomu, he gave an additional quirk too. A piece of All for One. I don't understand, Izuku whispers. Please, I don't... Our quirks revolve around DNA. First continues. One for All revolves around DNA. That is how the quirk is passed along, isn't it? The quirk you have has my DNA. It has the second, third, and fourth user's DNA. It has all the users prior to you. As soon as you accept the quirk, a piece of you is embedded into the quirk as it merges with your own DNA. That includes Yagi, you, and my brother. It was in his hands before any of us. Izuku nods slowly, trying to process this. But my quirk. Your biology isn't that of someone with a quirk. First offers slowly, kindly, and sympathetic. You have the toe joint. Your body was never meant to manifest a quirk. Your heart was never meant to manifest a quirk, especially not something of such power. But then how? I believe your friend is the answer to that. First cocks his head down to look at Oboro. You thought, as I did, that your friend was using your quirk, your ability to see ghosts, but I don't think that's the case. One for All does consider him an extension of you, or perhaps it considers him an extension of One for All itself. My brother gave the Nomu a quirk. It possesses the same traces of DNA that you, I, and One for All itself possesses. It's in the same way that One for All still acknowledges Toshinori as a wielder, even if he hasn't joined us yet. While he was using those remaining embers of One for All, when you actually possessed the quirk, your friend may not have realized, may not have even known, but there was a connection between the two of you before you'd even met. He's been using... It was One for all this time? First shrugs faintly, but does bow his head in a nod. I think it's very likely. Izuku's quiet for a long second. Is One for All going to kill me? First sighs heavily, looking away. I think trying to access the sheer amount of power needed to not only consumes the energy of the person, like you did to bring your friend along with you, but attempt to force out my brother's possession over your friend's body. Your heart wasn't prepared to handle the quirk like that. Your body was unprepared for such sheer energy. Frankly, I'm not sure even a body evolved to possess a quirk would be able to handle such an event. Will I live? Izuku whispers, mind flashing to Shoten Hisashi. He'd just got a family. Was he going to lose it? Then his brain flicks to Oboro. The ghost is still before him. Will he live? I need something to come out of this. I need to know I didn't give it all up for nothing. That I didn't risk everything for... I don't know. First repeats calmly. I suppose it'll come down to what's happening out there. How they handle what's to come. Your body is going to fail very shortly. Your heart is going to give out. Your life will be in their hands. Those outside the quirk... Just know, Ninth, you're safe here, whether you wake up or whether you... The vestige kindly doesn't finish his thought. Izuku doesn't think he could hear the words without breaking down. Izuku turns his attention downward toward Oboro. Will he be okay? In here, with us? One for All believes he belongs here. First shrugs awkwardly, though he looks also confused. Though his consciousness isn't supposed to be here. It's a strain to come to One for All's plane of existence, even for someone who possesses the quirk, so I'm not surprised he hasn't stirred. You're welcome to try and wake him up. I didn't try. He has a distaste for me, doesn't he? Izuku bites back a smile at first hesitance to admit such a thing. Izuku shakes away the moment of amusement, hand still on the ghost, giving a light shake. Oboro? You're, gonna want to wake up, I think. Izuku, man, 5 more minutes. The ghost moans out, curling closer into himself. I'm exhausted. Oboro, buddy, Izuku snorts out. We're not alone. You're in my world, Shirakumo-kun. First adds calmly, watching the exchange with a furrowed brow. You're quite the marvel, a ghost able to access One for All's power. I think it's due time that we met. Oboro's eyes blink open and he pushes himself up quickly when the new voice registers. For a second, the ghost just blinks owlishly, attention flitting around the plane of One for All. Are we dead? Oboro breathes tiredly, looking back at Izuku almost disapprovingly. Izuku narrows his eyes right back, urging the ghost to say something stupid about them trying to reunite Oboro with his body. It's not like it was Izuku's idea in the first place. Not only had Oboro been the one to spark the idea, insist a bit too, but it was the two of them in that cell too, not just Izuku. Not yet, First says easily. Izuku can't tell if he's joking or not. Izuku doesn't want to know either way. Oboro whips around to face First. Izuku, Oboro says calmly. What the fuck is going on? Where are we? Who is... Oboro freezes, glancing around again, seeming to really take in his surroundings before an unimpressed expression settles on his face, and he turns back to face First. The ghost's arms crossed tightly over his chest, regarding First in an unfriendly manner. You must be the asshole First wielder of One For All gave him a new quirk after telling him he wasn't ready. First's expression doesn't change. I suppose that would be me. Obro's eyes narrow as he finally pushes himself up, first to his knees, and then up so that he's standing between the vestige and the green-haired teenager. Izuku follows suit, a bit unbalanced with One For All clinging to his legs. Obro, Izuku notices, doesn't have the same possessive cling to him. First is still enveloped by the quirk, as if it's a part of him by how it whiffs off his frame, and it's consuming Izuku again, just his lower half so far, as if staking claim on him too, but Obro is untouched. Maybe One For All hasn't completely claimed him, or maybe it's because Obro never actually possessed the quirk, even if he'd been using it unknowingly. You've got some nerve, vestige. Obro, Izuku chides disapprovingly. First doesn't seem offended, just scans Obro thoughtfully before cocking his head faintly to the side. I don't have control of the quirk, First informs before Obro can speak. I may be able to offer information and draw ninth here, when the need arises, but I can't control how or when One For All offers power, and I don't have any control of the quirks that came after my time as a wielder. None of us do. You're rightfully angry, and I understand that after watching Ninth struggle, but I'm glad One For All is finally showing us its true potential in Ninth's hands. It gives him what he needs when he needs it, and it's done the same for all of us. Are you saying it's sentient? Obro cocks an eyebrow, anger draining faintly. One For All is a breed of its own. First shrugs uncertainly. It's an answer without truly answering. It's weird that even after so long in the quirk itself, First still doesn't understand either. It's not this nor that. It is what it is. Not even I know its true potential, nor did I know that a wielder could even be capable of manifesting the quirks of our past wielders. I suppose Ninth here is also a breed of his own with that ability of his, fated to inherit One For All's true power. Obro is quiet for a long second. How am I here? Ninth brought you here. First bows his head. I was unaware of how entwined the two of you got when you accessed One For All's power. I brought Ninth and you came as an extension of him. You're here, but you don't belong here. Hang on. Obro blinks with wide eyes. Since I accessed One For All's power? I don't have a quirk, Izuku admits to his friend, gaze trained on the floor. I can see ghosts, but everything that happened, that wasn't me, Obro, that was you. It wasn't me. Obro lifts his hands in surrender, as if they're accusing him instead of telling him what they've realized. How the hell would I do that anyways? I'd never. It's not a conscious decision. First shrugs simply. You don't decide, it just happens. I've been watching you both with your quirks, Shirakumo and Cloud, and you, Ninth, with One For All. As I said, One For All offers us what we need, when we need it. You're an extension of Ninth, so you've been accessing it through Ninth. I don't. Obro's staring wide-eyed now, attention flicking between Izuku and the first vestige. How is that even possible? First glances at Izuku for a long second before offering another light shrug. I've come to the conclusion that it's because both your proximity to Ninth, as being without a true form, as well as your connection to One For All itself. Obro blinks owlishly, before whipping around to face Izuku. He's talking in riddles, the ghost accuses. What does he mean? Your body, Izuku offers slowly. Kurogiri has a quirk that you don't. Cloud has been changed, or altered, or even just put on the back burner in exchange for the transportation quirk Shigaraki has been using, the Void Portal one. But it's still you, still your body. So? Obro whines uncertainly. So we're connected, Izuku offers a light smile. By DNA. All for One's DNA specifically. When he gave your body a quirk and when I inherited One For All from Yagi-san, our DNA changed a bit. Wait. Obro breathes out, a deep frown settling on his lips and genuine disgust. That means... Oh, gross. You mean to tell me that I've got some wrinkly old villain's DNA in me? That's one way to put it. First snorts out something that sounds suspiciously like a laugh, head bowing and a nod. Unfortunately, anyone to possess One For All, or anyone who's interacted with my brother's quirk, whether willing or not, will have an essence of his DNA fused into theirs. That's just the fact of his quirk, I'm sorry. You didn't do it. What's with One For All wielders apologizing for things that aren't their fault? Obro mutters gruffly. Izuku glances over at first, only slightly surprised to see the vestige glancing his way in return. So it's that DNA that made me able to what? Use One For All? I've never been able to do what Izuku does, so I don't know. Access your own quirk, First corrects kindly. You've never been able to access One for All as a whole, just maybe the residual energy. Even as an extension of Ninth, you'd never been given One for All. It can only be passed willingly, and Ninth never intended to pass it to you. One for All strengthens what already exists. You used your quirk, and you had more power when doing so, right? Obro nods slowly, prompting an agreeing nod from First himself. It's just as Ninth is able to manifest quirks of the users before him. I believe One for All considers you a branch of itself, like the quirks of the past users that it's held on to. I was unaware it was stockpiling quirks as well. We were just as surprised when Daigoro's quirk had manifested in Ninth. I'm not sure how that would have played out if Ninth couldn't see us. The vestige continues thoughtfully. I think you tapped into that power by proximity, and it made you stronger. It accepted you as both a part of Nine and a part of itself. But Ninth is the wielder, and your DNA structure, though similar because of my brother's interference, is different. Ninth may not have a quirk, but his ability to see spirits opened that door to that proximity. How can you be sure, though? Izuku asked softly. He really doesn't want to admit that he'd still been quirkless all this time. He'd honestly liked the thought that his weirdness was normal because it was just a quirk. Quirks were normal, but it's not a quirk, and he's just weird again. He's weird again, and he doesn't have any excuses. You could not touch the girl, First says quietly, just to Izuku. He looks apologetic but truthful. You've never been able to touch any of them, have you? Ninth, the criteria was met in the bar, and you weren't able to interact with the child. I know you've always wondered why. I don't know for sure, but I do know that you can't have a quirk by typical natural manifestation standards without having a body equipped to handle one. You were never meant to have a quirk. Izuku brings a hand up to palm at his eyes, bowing his head in a nod. It makes sense. He really hadn't been able to figure out why it worked with Obro, but not with Hana. First is right. The criteria was met that day in the bar. Maybe he didn't have a whole lot of energy that day, but he'd done more with less with Obro. It had been a thought in the back of his mind since Hana had gone right through him, unable to use his energy like Obro did. It had just never made sense, considering how desperate Izuku was for Hana to help him. Desperation had always been a force activation, hadn't it? So why hadn't it worked then? It wouldn't work if there was no quirk to activate. If Obro was the one doing it, and he wasn't there was nothing Izuku could have done. Izuku supposes it's nice to have an answer after all this time. So Izuku bites his lip hard. Will it hurt me, One for All, if I keep using it? It has, First admits. But I think when there's not something else feeding off of it, I don't think it'll be as much of a risk. Your temperature will still play a factor simply because you can see us and we're a part of you now, but you shouldn't have any problems. No more than any of the previous wielders have had. We just have more freedom to aid you in your fight. No more attempting to reunite lost souls to their bodies, though. Izuku snorts out a soft laugh, ducking his head in a nod of agreement. He won't die, though, will he? Obro swallows roughly. That's out of our hands. First tucks his hands into the pockets of his pants. Time is still ticking. It does still pass in the outside world, even when you are here. Ninth, you need to transfer your friend out of One for All. I fear the longer he stays with me, the less likely it'll be he's able to leave. Unless, of course, you'd like to join us in One for All. Pass. Obro winces. Talk about counterproductive. How do I leave? First glances at Izuku, frowning thoughtfully. It's on you, Ninth. It's yours now, One for All. My control is limited, and I'm afraid bringing you here was the peak of my capabilities now. But how? Izuku squeaks out, shooting a wide-eyed glance back at Obro. Use the quirk. First offers easily, as if all of this isn't insanely impossible. First turns back to Obro, head cocking faintly. You've been sharing the power. Use it together one last time. If you're reunited with your body, One for All will likely no longer consider you a part of Ninth. Be prepared for that, whatever it may entail. You're going to need a lot of energy if you want to overpower the Nomu programming my brother constructed. Use One for All once more as a team. You're no stranger to One for All's power. You've both got experience with the quirk, whether you'd realized it or not. Put it to use. Don't let this all be in vain. Izuku draws in a deep breath, finally turning back to Obro. You ready to fight for your life? I've been ready since I lost it. Obro's eyes are dark with determination. Izuku holds his hand out. The only thing he can think to do. Obro stares for a long second, before his eyes flick up to Izuku. See you on the other side. Yeah, Izuku offers a watery smile. You bet. Oboro bows his head in a nod, hand slapping into Izuku's outstretched one, lacking the distinct clap of their hands hitting one another considering their states of bodiless consciousness. He feels the ghost for just a second, their hands locked together, and then Izuku thinks about Kurogiri, Oboro's body, and then he's gone. Izuku blinks owlishly, drawing in an unsteady breath as his hand clenches around nothing. An energy surge shocks through Izuku, and he wonders if this is what it feels like when One For All is active for the vestiges. It's weird activating something when he's not exactly there to feel the power in his body. One For All always feels like a thrill when it activates, but it feels a bit different in the quirk. He hopes Oboro wins. He doesn't want this to have been for nothing in the end. Did it work? Izuku whirls around to face first when he comes back to his senses. Do you think he made it back to his body? The vestige shrugs helplessly. A strange, breathless feeling settles in Izuku's chest. He lifts a desperate hand to clutch at the shirt. Over the strange feeling, wide eyes falling onto first. The vestige doesn't look surprised, only a bit mournful. Izuku draws in a sharp breath. What's happening? Your heart stopped. First bows his head. It's out of our hands. Izuku comes to very slowly. He knows before he even opens his eyes that he's in the hospital. The first thing he decides upon his return to consciousness is that he's blissfully warm. It's easy to sink into the warmth without even opening his eyes. The second is that there's an obnoxious beating of what he assumes is a heart monitor. It's loud and obnoxious and repetitive, but that's probably a good thing, right? Despite the annoyance he feels at the sound disturbing the serenity of the room, he's happy to hear such a noise. That means he's alive, doesn't it? It's a good sound to hear, especially if what first had said is right. If his heart did stop. Izuku shifts faintly under the covers, drawing in a slow breath through his nose. His mouth feels dry, and there is a haziness he can't seem to shake even as he moves under the covers. Sunshine? Izuku gives an acknowledging hum. The teen looks at dry lips before squinting his eyes open. He takes a couple more shallow breaths before finally feeling like he's awake enough to speak. Papa? Yeah, comes a watery laugh, and then Izuku feels a hand on his own, and there's a gentle squeeze. He lets his head lull in that direction, tired eyes finding Hisashi. The man looks worse for the wear. Eyes tired and bags coloring the skin under his eyes. Izuku wonders if he's gone home at all. He also wonders how long he's been in the hospital. We're both here, my little love. You're okay, yeah? You're okay. I'm so glad you're finally awake. We were so worried, Izuku. You're okay now. I'm okay, Izuku agrees drowsily. Dad's here? Right here, Shota says softly. A different hand, hardened with calluses, flattens over his other wrist, a thumb dragging light lines across the top of his hand. It's nice, Izuku thinks. How are you feeling, kid? I haven't decided yet, Izuku tells him without thought. He hasn't really processed anything yet, and though he's awake, he doesn't really feel there. Being in One For All will do that to you, he thinks. I'm alive, though. Yeah, Hisashi breathes out desperately, hand tightening on Izuku's like the truth of Izuku's words is washing over him after a weight. You sure are, Sunshine. You gave us quite a scare, though. God, I'm so glad you're okay. That you're awake. I missed you so much, baby. I was so scared, Izuku. We were so scared. I'm sorry, Izuku whispers out. I didn't think that would happen. I thought it would be easy, like every other time. It's never been so powerful. Not even the first man to possess the quirk had seen it emulate so much power. I guess each passing wielder makes it stronger theory is pretty legit, huh? That's terrifying. Shota snorts out, thumb still stroking along Izuku's wrist. Yeah, Izuku agrees lightly. I've never felt power like that. What actually happened? Hisashi sucks in a panicked breath, looking away sharply and brushing away the tears clinging to his lashes under his glasses. You very nearly almost died, sweetheart. Your... My heart stopped. Izuku lets his gaze settle on the ceiling panels, just so he doesn't have to look at either guardian. He doesn't need that explained. He remembers that. I know that. I felt it. One For All protected my consciousness, and you guys... First, the first to inherit my quirk said it was in your hands, so thank you for taking care of me. Oh, my sweet baby. Hisashi coos gently, hand lifting off of Izuku's hand to push back his mess of green bangs. That's never something you need to thank us to do, you dig? Your life was our priority, and I'm so sorry we let it get out of hand. We shouldn't have let you do this, Shota continues quietly. We never should have let you put yourself on the line on the off chance something. We could have lost both of you. We're the adults, and we should have been the voice of reason in this. We're sorry, kid. You should have never been able to try. Should have never been able to put yourself in unnecessary danger. Izuku's quiet for a long second. He sucks in a breath of defeat, squeezing his eyes shut. Did it not work? Did I fail? Is he... Hisashi thumbs at Izuku's cheek with a gentle touch before he shifts to the side a bit. Izuku glances over, lulling his head in Hisashi's direction only to choke on a breath when he sees that there, in the bed next to him, lays Oboro. He pushes himself up a bit, gaze flicking quickly to the machines attached to the other's body, squinting hard to read the machine only for a hollow feeling of hopefulness to settle in his chest. A heartbeat. Oboro has a heartbeat. Kurogiri didn't, and Nomu wouldn't. He's... Shota hesitates, frowning. He's alive, but we're not really sure who's in there, Hisashi continues gently, hand now on Izuku's shoulder where he gently eases Izuku back into the pillows. It could be Oboro, but it might still be the Nomu. If he fought like he said he was going to, then it's Oboro, Izuku tells them sharply, only wincing back into the pillows when his guardians share a surprised look. Sorry, just... I love your positivity. Hisashi offers a light smile, brushing off the outburst. We get it. Oboro's a fighter, so I hope you're right, Sunshine. If anyone would fight like hell, I know it would be him. Shota looks away. Just remember you tried your hardest, even if... Please remember that some things can't be fixed, Izuku, no matter how hard you try, no matter what you give. All for One is powerful, and whatever they did to him to create Kurogiri is bound to be strong, too. I don't want you to blame yourself if this doesn't work out the way you want it to. Izuku turns that over in his head a couple of times before his emotions start to crack. If it really is Kurogiri still in Oboro's body, then... I don't see him in here, Izuku croaks out. If it doesn't work out the way I want it to, then I... Shh. Hisashi's up now, perching on the edge of Izuku's hospital bed so that he can set an arm over Izuku's shoulders. Izuku instantly turns into the embrace, burying his face in Hisashi's side. You did far more than anyone should have asked of you, Sunshine. Whatever happens, it's not your fault. You tried, okay? That's all anyone can do. Izuku can only cry harder when he thinks of losing Oboro as a ghost and not getting him back as a living person again. What if he's gone? He doesn't know what he'll do without his best friend around in some form or another. When he calms down, his guardians tell him a bit more about what had happened to Tartarus, how Oboro had disappeared without a trace, and only a moment later Izuku lost consciousness, the flatlining of his heart following only a second later. Izuku doesn't like the grim, self-loathing looks in both of his guardians' gazes as they tell him about their perspectives. Izuku's sorry he made them witness such a thing. He can only imagine how scared they must have been. He knows he'd do it as many times as it takes if there was even a chance Oboro might be able to come back. Izuku wisely doesn't mention that to his guardians. Izuku tries to match everything up with what was said in the quirk, with what first had been telling him. It all lines up. From time passing differently in the quirk to Izuku's heart stopping in the real world, from even Oboro disappearing from sight around the same time Izuku's consciousness had been drawn into the one-for-all realm. They'd gone together, after all. But that's where the timing gets a bit wonky. He doesn't remember much past his heart giving out, the period of time between that moment and waking up, 3 days later, apparently. He wonders if first had been watching over him in the quirk. He can't remember. Izuku's guardians fawn over him. He's checked over by a nurse. Then a doctor comes in to speak with him, glad to see him awake. Shota and Hisashi don't leave the room once, and Izuku has a bad feeling that this is what the past couple of days have looked like for the two of them. They're cautious about his temperature, and they're insistent about getting him to drink some water and even insisting he eat the meal the hospital staff brings up for him. If you want to be home before Christmas, you've got to jump through the hospital's hoops, kiddo. Izuku enjoys the comfort that comes with being awake. Neither man seems too keen to go too far away, and he's usually got one of them touching him in some way. Hisashi's hand on his ankle as the man reads through emails. Shota's elbow touching Izuku's side as the man rests his eyes, with his arms crossed on the surface of Izuku's mattress. Hisashi perched on the edge of his bed, just carting his fingers through Izuku's curls, and Shota tucking him under his arm as he leans back against the pillows too. Everyone's attention still drifts to Oboro, watching over him as well. He hasn't shown any sign of stirring, still, but Izuku is hopeful Oboro will wake up, that that it'll actually be Oboro back in his body, where he belongs. It's drawing closer to evening when the bed beside Izuku shifts with movement. Izuku jerks up, startling Shota awake, and Hisashi, who'd been silently staring off into space at Izuku's side, jolts up too, both guardians following Izuku's gaze. Hisashi's the first, over to Oboro's bed, swallowing roughly as he pauses at his bedside. Oboro? The body sucks in a rough breath, eyes squeezing shut. Why does it feel like I just got crushed by a building? Relief has Izuku sinking back into his pillows as he tries to swallow back the tears. It worked. They'd made it work. They brought him back. He was alive and Kurogiri was gone. That was Oboro. He was back. He was alive. Because you got crushed by a building? Shota suggests dryly from Izuku's side. How are you feeling? Rough. Oboro lets out a pained laugh. The ghost, Izuku faintly wonders if that's an incorrect term now, Oboro, finally opens his eyes, glancing to the side. For a long second he just stares, and then his head cocks to the side faintly as he glances between Shota and Hisashi. Wow, you two look old. What happened there? Hisashi draws in a shaky breath, and Izuku feels Shota tense at his side. Izuku considers the words for a long second, tries hard to process them. Izuku feels like he can't breathe. It feels like Oboro just dumped a bucket of ice water over his head. He doesn't think he breathes for a second, then he feels Shota's hand on his back, rubbing a light circle over his shoulder. It takes a second longer for Izuku to realize he's tearing up again. Oboro doesn't remember. He roughly drags his fists over his eyes, trying to swallow down the sobs. He doesn't want to disturb the other, especially if Oboro doesn't remember him. Izuku? Comes Oboro's breathy voice. Hey, what's wrong? It worked, yeah, I'm here. Where's the smile? I'm back, I'm alive. Come on, don't cry. Please don't cry, or I'll cry too. And Izuku does sob now, wiping furiously at his eyes, as he pushes himself out of bed and all but throws himself at Oboro. He's hardly aware of the wounded sound the other makes, or the sharp inhale Oboro sucks in when Izuku collides with him. Only a second later, Oboro's arms wrap around him in return. Izuku melts into the light squeeze Oboro gives. Izuku cries out. I thought you didn't remember me. What? Oboro sounds breathless. Because I said, you're such an asshole. Izuku sobs into the other's chest, a tight feeling of anger and relief swirling in his chest as his fists tighten in the papery hospital pajamas Oboro wears. I hate you. You're the worst, but I can't imagine my life without you. Dude, Hisashi tuts disapprovingly. I'm sorry. Oboro coos back to Izuku, genuinely apologetic. Really? I'm so sorry, buddy. I didn't mean to. It's been so long, I don't know what I thought. I don't think I did think. Just said it. Man, I am an asshole. Why do you people even like me? I'm so sorry, Izuku. I didn't mean to scare you. I'm okay. I remember you. I remember it all. And you're my best friend. How could I ever forget you, huh? Izuku just presses his face further into the ghost's chest, heart feeling warm at the steady beating he feels. Oboro has a real body again. He's got a real beating heart, and his chest rises and falls with breaths. A new round of tears prick in Izuku's eyes. Hey, it's okay. I'm okay. Eyes up for a second, dude. Oboro's finger hooks under Izuku's chin, forcing his gaze up. The blue-haired teen offers a light, tired smile. Do you think I'd forget you after everything you did for me? Everything we've been through? Fat chance, kid. You risked everything for me. I'm sorry I didn't think before speaking. I should work on that. It's okay, Izuku whispers, nuzzling back into his friend. You're still an asshole. Oh, definitely. Oboro laughs in agreement, chest rumbling along with the sound. Always. Think it's part of my charm, Shota snorts a laugh in the distance, and Hisashi lets out a wet-sounding snicker. When Izuku finally glances over, Shota and Hisashi both have tears in their eyes as they watch Izuku and Oboro. They're both standing at Oboro's bedside now, soft, fond looks on their faces. Izuku spots their hands clutching at each other's like they're both restraining themselves from interrupting. Izuku can't help but feel thankful, even if they've known Oboro longer. Izuku shifts, and only when Oboro lets out another wounded sound does the teen remember that he'd been terribly injured and was still probably sore. Oh, God! Izuku squeaks out, trying to scramble off of his friend without injuring him any more. He doesn't get far, as Oboro's arms lock over his shoulders, holding him in place. He fights half-heartedly against Oboro, not wanting to hurt him any more. You're hurt, Izuku insists flatly, letting himself go boneless despite the words. No, don't go. I feel pain. Oboro sounds far too happy about that. He's smiling even as he winces. I feel it. Oh, wow. I forgot how much hurt hurts. Yikes. Just give me a second. Don't leave, but also don't move. Ouch. Masochist. Shota scoffs under his breath to Hisashi. Oboro lets out a full-bellied laugh, attention lulling in Shota's direction. Glad to see you're still a prick, Sho-chan. I missed you. And you too, Zashi, of course. I'd literally die for a real hug from you two after I get my turn cuddling our kid. I don't believe you have any rights to him. Shota cocks an eyebrow. I don't remember seeing any Shirokuma Oboro on any of that paperwork we signed. You don't need paperwork to be a good parent. You're not my parent. Izuku knows that his cheeks have flushed pink. I hate you. Well, you've got a weird way of showing it. Oboro chuckles, hugging him a bit closer. I guess it's kind of weird now that I'm alive again, huh? It was always weird, Izuku retorts under his breath. You just never acknowledged it, and I guess it wasn't that bad when I was the only one suffering. You're always weird. Yeah, Oboro agrees with a bright smile. But there's nothing wrong with that, is there? Izuku thinks back to his time in the quirk with First and Oboro. No, he agrees softly. I guess there isn't. A lot happens after Oboro wakes up. Detective Tsukuchi comes around, looking a bit skeptical of Oboro despite the relief in his gaze when he sees both Izuku and Oboro awake. They're sat in one hospital bed side by side, even though the doctors and nurses have constantly been corralling them into their own beds whenever they see it. Hisashi and Shota don't say anything about Izuku sneaking out of bed after all medical personnel leave the room after their checks and rounds. Izuku figures if his guardians don't have a problem with it, medical staff shouldn't either, and it's not like any of them know what any of the four of them have been through in the past couple of days. They have no right to keep Izuku and Oboro in separate beds if it's not causing them any harm. Besides, Izuku feels fine now, despite the fact that they're keeping him overnight for observation again. The cover story is a simple one. Oboro was held captive by the League of Villains since the day that he was wrongfully declared deceased. Tsukuchi is still ironing out the details of that as he works on filing the paperwork that'll reverse Oboro's death certificate. The teen's young appearance, despite over 13 years passing since that day, is explained by the broad excuse of a quirk like Eri-chan's rewind quirk that had been used on Oboro while he was with the League. It's not a solid explanation, but none of them really thinks that anyone will question much further past the fact that Oboro is alive after all this time, no matter how he looks. You don't look a gift horse in the mouth, right? That's about all the information offered up to anyone who'd known Oboro when he was alive. Everything else is kept hushed under the ruse of confidentiality. Which isn't really a ruse, technically, when you think about it. It doesn't actually have to be hidden, but for both Izuku and Oboro's sake, that's the cover story they go with. It protects Izuku's secret and keeps Oboro out of the spotlight, which is important if he wants to step back into a normalish life. If the League knew, Izuku isn't really sure what they'd do. Especially after they'd taken Kurogiri from Shigaraki as well. This is mostly for the public, the Shirakumo family, and Hitoshi's parents, those who knew Oboro personally when he was alive, and would be able to tell it was actually him after he died all those years ago. Very few people are offered the actual story. Nezu and Recovery Girl are the first, informed upon arrival when they come in for Oboro to receive a healing treatment from the old woman. The rodent looks oddly pleased as he surveys Oboro intently, and Recovery Girl brushes away tears as she pinches Oboro's cheek in a very grandmotherly fashion. It's Oboro's 16th healing session, Izuku's told. That thought makes him a bit queasy. Nomuri and Ida Tensei are the next two to find out. They're told by Shota and Hisashi in the hallways before the two rush into the room. Nomuri throwing herself onto Oboro while Tensei, still recovering and mostly wheelchair-bound, still, despite his improvements in rehabilitation, settling at the side of the bed to take Oboro's hand into his own. Ida Tenya is always quite proud to talk about his older brother whenever he can. They're both reasonably shocked to find Oboro there, alive, and there's a lot of crying when the five friends are reunited after so long. They don't leave until the nurses kick them out when visiting hours are over. It's a good thing Izuku is still considered a child, and his guardians are allowed to stay still. He doesn't want them to leave. Hitoshi is the last to know, arriving in early the following morning after his mother drops him off, stopping frozen in their hospital room when he spots Oboro on one of the beds too, heart monitor still beeping, announcing the fact that he was very much alive. Izuku snickers to himself at Hitoshi's mind-blown expression. Tell me I'm not crazy. The purple-haired teen mutters in shock. A beat passes. What the hell is wrong with the two of you? You, Hitoshi carries on before either can get a word in, pointing an accusatory finger at Izuku, basically died, and you, attention on Oboro now, came back to life? I think you two idiots are a bit backwards there. Not that I'm not glad that you're alive, Ro, but you're both insane. What the hell happened? So they told him everything, because he already knows most of it anyways. Izuku gets released from the hospital, but they stay with Oboro still. The blue-haired teen's family had been called right after he'd woken up and been checked out by Tsukuchi just to ensure that it was actually him and not Kurogiri. They arrived not even 3 hours later. Izashi's the one who heads down to the receptionist area to bring Oboro's family up to his room. It's easier than making them find the room by themselves, especially in a secluded part of the hospital, courtesy of Detective Tsukuchi, who pulled some strings. They were definitely speeding to get here so fast. Oboro tells Shota and Izuku in amusement. His eyes are wide with anticipation, but there's also a dull nervousness in his gaze. Izuku slips his hand into Oboro, smiling crookedly, when Oboro gives his hand a little squeeze and thanks. I think anyone who just learned that their kid was alive after so long would gladly break a couple of laws to make it to them. Shota snorts back, smiling gently at Izuku, even though he'd obviously been talking to Oboro. I would. That reunion is one that makes Izuku cry, even from where he's tucked under Shota's arm and out of the chaos of people strikingly similar to Oboro, rushing the bed and desperately hugging the teen. If he thought there was a lot of crying between the school friends, he stands corrected when the Shirakumo family is finally reunited with their long-lost member. Oboro's parents, all of his siblings, and even a couple of his siblings' spouses squeeze into the room despite the room limit. It's almost a bit suffocating, but it's also so lively, thankful, and happy. Oboro's grinning so wide that it must hurt as he clutches at his parents and hugs his siblings, laughing through tears as he mumbles back sentiments being whispered to him. He tells them he doesn't remember what happened. He tells them that he doesn't remember anything. His family seems relieved. Oboro gets discharged to his parents just before dinner that same day as Izuku getting discharged. His heart is in his throat when it's just him and Oboro alone in the room after a near-constant flood of people. The cluster of Shirakumos had been ushered out of the room by a nurse, and Oboro's parents are down signing discharge paperwork. Izuku isn't sure where Hisashi is, but Shota had stepped out to grab a coffee from the cafeteria. Are you sure they'll let you come back? Izuku had whispered. I mean, you died, you've been gone, will they? Oboro was going home with his parents. Despite how much Izuku wanted the ghost to stay close, he can't bear the thought of his friend being away from him after Oboro had been a constant in his life for so long. Yeah, Oboro nods slowly. It might take some convincing, but I know where I belong, and I know what I want to do. I'm going to be a hero still, and there's no way they can keep me from you, bestie. Don't forget that even though I look like I'm 17, I'm definitely still 31. Trust me, dude. I always do, Izuku breathes out, watching with a heavy heart as Oboro finally pushes himself up from the bed. He straightens stiffly, like it aches. Wincing as he does so, they both know he'll have chronic pain, and he'll need rehabilitation before he'll be able to be enrolled in Yuuei again, but he's alive, and that's all that really matters. Oboro is hopeful that he'll be ready to enroll again by the time Izuku's class hits their second year. Then he'll be able to just jump into classes with them. Shota hadn't looked against the idea entirely, but they definitely need to convince him, and Principal Nezu. Izuku secretly hopes Oboro is allowed to do that too. The ghost smiles lightly at the soft admission as he takes the bag of clothes his sister had brought for him upon being informed that he was getting discharged and would be going home with them, heading for the bathroom adjoining their room. And he walks straight into the door when he gets there. Izuku bursts into a startled laugh as the older teen recoils back in shock. Izuku tries to swallow it down in fear of coming off rude. He barely managed to contain it. Are you okay? I am not a ghost, Oboro says wide-eyed. I'll need to get used to that again. I can't go through things. Solid door. Solid me. Weird. Izuku snorts a laugh. Christmas arrives quickly. Izuku doesn't see Oboro after they're separated outside of the hospital. Izuku hates it. They just got their son back, sweetheart, Hisashi says gently, petting Izuku's hair when they're curled up on the couch on Christmas Eve as Shota digs through the storage closet in the apartment for their bin of Christmas decorations. You can't blame them for wanting to keep him close for a bit. We're holding on to you too, and you were only gone for a few minutes, you dig? Let them process. I know you miss him too. Izuku doesn't reply, but he does bury his face in the blanket that he has tugged up to his face. Izuku isn't very familiar with Christmas. It's not a holiday he and his mother ever really celebrated, not to the extent Hisashi and Shota seem to. They've got a small Christmas tree put up in the living room, and they've decorated it as a family. Just last night before bed, Izuku surprises to find presents under the tree when he stumbles from his room a bit earlier than he usually does the following morning. Shota's on the couch, watching the twinkling lights of the tree as he sips at his coffee. It's still dark, so it's really pretty. Izuku's almost mesmerized by it. Nemo is curled up in his lap and hardly even stirs when Izuku plops down beside his guardians. Shota shifts enough so that he can tuck Izuku under his arm again, both their attention settling on the tree. There's a distant comfort in the fact that they don't need to talk to be comfortable. Shota had just silently offered the closeness, and Izuku had all but fallen into it. Distantly, Izuku hears the shower running. They're quiet for a long moment, just enjoying each other's company. Hisashi clings to Americanized Christmas, Shota explains when Izuku finally glances over. I humor him, so I hope you don't mind celebrating with us. It's a pretty tame Christmas for us this year after everything, but it's fine if you don't want to. There are presents, Izuku observes from his spot. Keen eye, problem child, Shota teases fondly. We like to exchange gifts. There's something for everyone down there, if you're feeling up to it. We're going to have everyone over this afternoon. Nem and Eri, Tensei and Tenya are supposed to come down for a bit before their family Christmas celebration. Toshi and his mom and dad. We invited Oboro, but his family's doing their own little Christmas celebration, so I'm not sure if we'll see him, and we thought you might appreciate Yagi stopping by, too. You're close to him, so we swallowed our pride and invited him, too. I didn't get anyone anything. Izuku frowns thoughtfully. Consider not dying a very appreciated gift for Hisashi and I, okay? And I'm sure no one else will blame you either, considering you spent the last little while in a hospital bed. Don't worry about it. That's hardly a gift, Izuku snorts back. And yet, we're so very happy to have received it from you, anyways. Shota shoots back lightly, offering a tiny smile. Seriously, kid, it's not about the gifts around here. It's about the company. We just wanted to make it special for you. Izuku's heart thumps fondly in his chest. Thank you. When Hisashi finally surfaces, wet hair tied up in a loose bun, they enjoy each other's company for a bit. Hisashi makes Izuku and himself hot chocolate, and Izuku laughs when the man adds a handful of tiny marshmallows. Shota smiles fondly, sipping at a second cup of coffee. Only when they all have drinks does Hisashi enthusiastically start doling out the gifts under the tree. Izuku can see what Shota was saying. The blonde is nearly vibrating in excitement. Izuku gets some new journals and some clothes, a nice stationery set, and a pack of colored pencils for his sketching. He's overwhelmed by the genuine interest in him that they're expressing by each present being something that he actually likes, something he'll use. He's just opening the next gift Hisashi had passed over, something knitted, when a black void opens in the middle of their living room. For a second, just a second, Izuku's heart is in his throat until... Oh, thank all things holy, I was afraid that it wouldn't work, and I'd end up somewhere random. Hi, friends! Izuku melts back into the couch, loosening the grip he's had on the scarf that he just opened. You can use warp. Izuku blinks as the reality of that finally crashes over him. Oboro had had it for what, a couple of days, and he could already travel with it. Yep, I've been practicing. Oboro flashes a wide grin as he plops down on the couch next to Izuku. You know, this apartment was the first coordinates I memorized when I realized I kept the quirk. If I've got dirty, gross villain DNA in me, I might as well make the best of it. I thought cloud travel was good, but instant travel's amazing. How'd you convince your folks to let you come here? Hisashi asked from his spot in front of the Christmas tree. I didn't think we'd see you for at least a couple more days. Oboro hesitates, and it's honestly very telling. There's no way he got permission to leave his parents' home. Oboro offers a sheepish laugh as he averts his gaze and rubs guiltily at the back of his neck. You didn't tell anyone, did you? Shota scoffs, looking only slightly humored. Your parents are going to flip. We are not taking the blame. Now, coffee or hot chocolate? Hot chocolate! Oboro grins, smiling thankfully as Shota stands to prepare the drink. Oboro's grin falters slightly as he continues. They were hovering. I had to get away. I forgot they had a tendency to be overbearing. And it's tenfold after all this shit. I was unprepared to be on house arrest after I just got back. Oboro whines as he continues. I just wanted some peace and quiet. I mean, I get it, I do, but still, I went from no interaction with anyone but Zuko to interaction overload. My family can be overwhelming. I'll apologize later, I promise, but right now, I think this is the family I need to be with. Right, nephew? Don't call me that, Zuko replies instantly, running his hand over the scarf, depicting the colors of All Might's costume that's in his lap. Now that he can actually look at it, he decides that he's never loved a scarf as much as he loves this one. I'm glad you're here, though. See? Oboro perks up, throwing an arm over Izuku's shoulder and pushing in closer. Izuku is completely used to it already. This is definitely where I belong right now. It's practically baby's first Christmas over here. Izuku puffs his cheeks out, but doesn't bother voicing his detest. Hisashi still snickers under his breath before shooting Izuku an apologetic smile at the teasing. Izuku's oddly touched by the sympathy that had never been offered before, since Oboro's teasing had never been heard. You're always welcome here, Hisashi says, when he can speak without a humored lilt, passing Oboro a wrapped present. You know that. Just maybe shoot your folks a text, yeah? What are you, my dad? Obro mopes, though he does pull his new phone from his pocket. It's like you all forget I'm older than all of you, but sure, boss me around, why don't you? It's like you forget we're parents, too. Shota fires back with a cocked eyebrow. The underground hero is now only returning to the living room, fingers clutched around the handles of a Christmas mug Hisashi had thought was adorable in the shops. He sets the mug down on the coffee table in front of Oboro. There, text sent. Oboro pouts, setting his phone down on the armrest of the couch. Only a second later, Oboro's phone buzzes and his pout deepens. He hesitates before finally picking it up to scan the new messages, where he deflates. And would you look at that? Text responded to. I'm 31. I'm past grounding age. I live here now. This is your fault. Denied. Shota snorts out, but he does smile in a way that conveys that he's not serious. Izuku knows there's been talk of Oboro living with him, if and when he's cleared to return to school. Oboro had enthused about bunk beds. I always knew you were cruel, Sho-chan. Oboro flops back into the couch after picking up his mug, taking a sip, expression lightening as he savors the rich chocolatiness. But I never thought you'd be this cruel. Shota laughs openly at that, stretching out to nudge his foot into Oboro's from the other end of the couch. Oboro's teasing smile softens. Anyways, Hisashi snickers as he picks up another gift. Where were we? All right. This is another one for you, Sunshine. We put a lot of thought into this one, kiddo. It's from Sho and I, and we hope you like it. You dig? Oh, hey, I know what's in that one. Oboro is grinning so widely. Izuku glances between the other teen and the gift now in his hands. If Oboro likes it, he's suspicious of it. The box is on the bigger side, but it's quite thin. It's neatly wrapped with a bow. It almost feels empty. He gives it a light shake, but it doesn't make any noise either. Huh. Izuku's nose scrunches up as he scans Oboro. How would you know? Hisashi yelps out, whipping around to glare at the blue-haired teen. Oboro's grin just widens. I've been hanging around for ages, man. I know what you guys have been up to, and believe me, it's been a struggle to keep my mouth shut. And you know, I saw you wrap it. He'll totally love it. Don't look so worried. Should I be worried? Izuku cocks an eyebrow, narrowed eyes jumping between Shota and Hisashi. No, Shota huffs fondly. Just open it, problem child. Izuku's nose scrunches up, but he does as he's told. He gently pulls at the tail of the ribbon and watches as it unravels. He tears into the wrapping paper, frowning thoughtfully at the box when he reaches it. It's still very flat. He has no idea what could be in there. Go on. Oboro nudges Izuku's arm. I'm on the edge of my seat. You know what's in it, Izuku retorts without any heat, finally easing the box open. For a long second, he just stares at the papers in the bottom of the box. Papers. He'd gotten papers? Thank you, Izuku. Shota shakes his head with a small smile. Please read them before you thank us. Oh, Izuku lets out a sheepish laugh. All right, sorry. Only you, Sunshine, would offer such genuine gratitude for a pile of paperwork without seeing what it is first. Hisashi snickers adorningly. I love you, sweetheart. Izuku offers a light smile at the blonde's sentiment before finally letting his eyes drop to the box again. He scans the first page, only to freeze when the words finally register. Izuku sucks in a breath as tears well in his eyes. Are you sure? We've never been sure about anything, Izuku, Shota says gently. You've been our kid from the moment that you stumbled in that door after Shota the night that you started staying with us. We've been thinking about this for a long time. And there, at the bottom of the box, is adoption paperwork. Adoption paperwork with his name on it. Izuku just stares down at the page, his heart hammering in his chest. It's not official quite yet, Shota continues awkwardly when Izuku can't seem to find his voice. You get a say, of course, and if you don't want to be adopted, that's fine too. We just thought... Yes, Izuku breathes out desperately, palming at his wet eyes. If you're sure you want me, then yeah, please, I want to be a part of your family. Darling, Hisashi coos, pushing himself up to his feet, only to lean over Izuku and wrap him in a tight hug. You're already a part of our family. You've always been our kid. They've been thinking about this for ages, man. Oboro adds, a soft smile on his lips. Shota had the paperwork started the second your mother signed away her rights to you. Her loss was their gain, eh? It all just came through, Shota adds after shooting the blue-haired teen an affronted look. We just wanted to make sure that you wanted this before we finalized the paperwork and sent it off for approval. Tsukuchi promised it's already as good as approved, but he still promised to put a rush on it the moment you agreed. You'll officially be ours by tomorrow night if you're okay with it. I'll really be yours? Izuku sniffles into Hisashi's chest. You really want to keep me? Forever? Of course, sweetheart. Hisashi breathes out, planting a kiss on the top of Izuku's head. Forever. We want nothing else. You've always been ours, you know that. We love you, Sunshine. We're just beyond glad to get to make it official. After everything that's happened, we know how delicate time is, and we want you here for every second of it, you dig? I love you guys, Izuku whispers, pressing his face closer to Hisashi, but catching Shota's eyes. The dark-haired man looks so fond. Izuku was just itching to give him a thankful hug as well. I'm so excited, Oro chirps, throwing his arms around Hisashi's shoulders, as Izuku moves to hug Shota too. You guys are official dads. An official dad and an official papa. Ah, I'm so happy for you all. And now that this is all official, guess who is now officially an uncle? You're not my uncle, Izuku laughs fondly, wiping the tears from his eyes. The Christmas party's a lot of fun. Izuku's having a good time. Everyone seems to be in high spirits, and he's silently pleased that everyone can get along for the sake of a holiday. Hitoshi's teaching Hida how to play video games with Oboro. Yagi-san sat at the table with Shota and Hitoshi's father, the three of them nursing glasses of sake that Namuri had brought. Hisashi, Yua, and Namuri are all bustling around the small kitchen, and Tensei, taking a break from his wheelchair and showing off his ability to use his legs in moderation, leans against the counter Oboro used to always sit at. Izuku's still in the living room, with the rest of the teenagers, Eri sleeping soundly on the love seat beside him. It's early in the evening, but Namuri had mentioned the little girl being too excited to fall asleep last night. Izuku cards his fingers through the little girl's soft hair, enjoying the lightness of a holiday with a family. It's a stark difference to the Christmases he'd spent alone growing up. It's movement out of the corner of his eye that catches his attention. He turns his head faintly to the side, stiffening when he notices, is that Hana? Deku? Comes the child's fearful voice. Hey, Izuku clears his throat. I've got to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back. Oboro cocks an eyebrow, but besides that, no one seems to mind. Izuku still pushes himself up, making sure that Eri's secured on the couch before sneaking off. He goes right past the bathroom, leading Hana into his bedroom. Hana, Izuku finally greets. What's wrong? Are you okay? The ghost child sniffles, fisting at her eyes before looking up at him with glossy brown eyes. He's scaring me, Deku, she whispers desperately. I don't like it. He's going crazy. Who, Hana? My brother. Hana shakes her head, voice coming out choked. Please, Deku, you've got to help him. All right, everyone. This is the conclusion to the fic Yuuei Survival Guide. This ends Chapter 50. I hope you guys have enjoyed this one. This is one of my all-time favorite reads, and one I know that now it's finished, I'm definitely going to go back and reread a lot. Just so that you guys are aware, the author had added a few of those paragraphs at the end to set this up for either a sequel or an epilogue. I think it's such a creative way to wrap this fic up, and leaving it open for the possibility of a continuation later on. If you exclude that last section with Hana showing up, the way this fic wraps up is absolutely amazing. I hope you guys have enjoyed those significantly. I mean, it was 50 hours plus of us going through this fic together. So let me know your thoughts and reactions, though. I'm dying to hear how you guys thought of the ending to this fic. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.